Good morning, afternoon, evening, or night, depending on when you're watching this. This is actually a re-recording because I forgot to hit record on the initial record at the very beginning, so we missed a little bit of that introduction. My name is Beth Sanders, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Registrar's Committee, Western Region, and we're so grateful that you wanted to join us today for this second webinar in our hands-on practical conservation for the collections professional webinar series. Our sponsor for today's webinar was Cook's Crating. As one of the nation's oldest and most respected fine arts handlers and shippers, Cook's Crating and Fine Arts Transportation is the company that many of the greatest American museums, galleries, and collectors turn to for their art moving needs. Based in Los Angeles, California, don't forget to contact Cook's Crating for your crating, shipping, installation, and storage needs. And thank you for being a Tier 1 sponsor of RCWR. Today we are very fortunate to have Carolina Veenstra of CA Veenstra Bookbinding and Conservation here with us. Carolina has 4 decades of experience as a conservator and an artist and has taught art and bookbinding to a wide range of students. She specializes in book and paper treatments and will be discussing creating custom book supports and cradles for items in your collection. Before I turn it over to Carolina, just going to run through a few logistics since this is a Zoom webinar. And we'll pop back into the original one shortly, and I promise before Carolina comes on, but we couldn't see anyone on screen, so we told them to feel perfectly comfortable in their pajamas. People use the chat to introduce themselves and put their questions and answer in the question and answer format. So at the very end, we were able to moderate those questions back to Carolina. We did record the webinar, and this was the moment that I realized I was not recording it. So shortly after this, we're going to switch back to the live recording, and thank you for understanding that technological mistakes do happen from time to time. As this was our second webinar, we'll just get better. So thank you again for joining us, and here is Carolina Veenstra.
Hi, everybody. I want to begin my presentation by acknowledging that the land I live and work on is within the Aboriginal territory of the Suquamish people, or the people of clear salt water. And I'm grateful for their care of these lands that I live in. I also want to thank Kate Leonard of the University of Washington Libraries, who helped me put this together, and Myrna Kelleher, who pre-recorded the demos that you're going to see. You're going to see 2 demos. They're each about 20 minutes long. One will be demonstrating this wedge support made from museum board, and the other will be this double wedge. So that is what the program is. My goal is to give you share some skills, specifically measuring, folding, cutting, so that you will have the confidence to build these on your own at your institution. I also want to add that I did send Beth some handouts, some resources for you, and she'll be sending those out later. Okay, so I want to start here. I'm going to tip my computer down so that you can see. I just want to discuss some book terminology here and some reasons why you would want book supports. So here we have a book. There's a cover and the text block. And what joins the two together is this section right here. This is the spine. And on the edge of the spine at the front and back is what is called the joint on the inside, on the outside, but on the inside, it's called the hinge. So same thing, just outside, inside. And this is the part of the book that usually breaks down the fastest or the soonest, especially on a heavy book. So here on this book, the joint is broken, but the hinge is still in one piece. So if you were gonna display like the title page, you would wanna give this book some support, the board. And you could do it as simply as just a pillow. This pillow here is made out of polyester fill that's inert and unbleached muslin, which is pH neutral. And you can just make it unobtrusive folded a little neater than I just folded it there. If you want to display a page that's inside the book, then you would want to have some wedges, and you could either use 2 of these single wedges, like this, or the double wedge, which I'll be showing you later. Okay, another simple method for just supporting a book board is just a stack of boards. And if you have access to some board material, acid-free, then you could do this. Okay, so the biggest challenge, oh, I wanted to just say one more thing. Sometimes you have a book that's actually so vulnerable, like say this one, which is broken, that you may not want to display it at all, and that you should consider the option of using a photocopy or a digital print to display the information on the inside of the book. So there's that. And one other thing, I just would say that you can use the same wedge design to just improve the viewing angle of the book. Okay, so the single thing that is really the most useful for just using cradles to display books is that sometimes the books just don't want to open, like this one that is just bound very tightly at the spine, or this one that has very thick paper that stands up. And so if you use a cradle, a double-sided cradle, then you can use some polyethylene or some Mylar to hold the book open in the cradle. And usually most of the books most of the contemporary books are case bound, and most of them open fairly well, especially if they are sewn. The way you can tell that a book is sewn is if you actually see threads in the middle of the sections. I'm not sure that the angle is very good there, but if you see sections along the head or tail of the book, then there's probably sewing on the inside. And the other kind of book that has a difficulty staying open is, I pulled one out, but I can't see it. But anyway, it is the perfect bound style book, which is not perfect at all. And those are books that are just glued. And trying to push them open will often just break the spine. So I'm not seeing Beth coming on yet, so I think I have a couple more minutes. And so I will just show you one more thing. Here is, I just pulled this out to show you, this is what a sewn book looks like on the inside. These are just some different styles of sewing. And this is what it looks like before it's sewn. I mean, before it's glued. Usually these sewn books are sewn and then glued. Oh, there was one other thing I was going to show you here with the supports is that you can, a variation of the wedge is this rectangular support that, that is made the same way with just one more set of folds and cuts. So, you know, yeah, good, Beth. Thanks.
Are we ready to start the first of the demonstration video?
Yeah, that's great. That worked good. Well, thanks.
Just going to share the screen.
Okay, so we are going to start by going over all the materials and tools that you need to make your in-house book supports. So the first thing you need is a good sturdy table. If you're going to use a folding table, you want to use one that has a solid heavy top. So, because what you don't want is you don't want a lot of wiggling when you're trying to cut. Second thing you need is a cutting mat. And the cutting mats, there's a lot of different manufacturers and they come in different sizes. I like to use this large one, which is I think 36 inches wide. You want to look for a cutting mat that's double-sided because it'll last longer. So cutting mats are self-healing rubber, and they really save your knife blades and extend the life of your knife blades. Then you need a good straight edge. So when I talk about a straight edge, I'm talking about a piece of metal that is thick. It doesn't matter whether it has measurements on it or not. You can get these very inexpensive brass ones at hardware stores, or you could get beautiful fancy ones at art supply stores or drafting supply stores. The main thing is that you want them to be a solid metal material that is thick. You do not want the kind of metal straight edge that has cork on the bottom, because although the cork on these keeps the straight edge from moving around, it creates a gap and you will not be able to cut through board with a straight, clean edge. Put these up here. Next, you need knives. Put this down here. So these are craft knives that have multiple blades. And here's you can see the multiple blades on these. And when your blade gets dull, you can snap it off, and then you have a fresh, sharp point to cut with. They come in small and large. I like the large ones for cutting board. All right, that's your second tool there. You'll need some kind of tool to mark, and you can use a pencil. I prefer a probe or a needle because then I don't have to erase the mark. But the marks that they make are hard to see, and it might be easier for you to use a pencil. Mechanical pencils are nice because they have a very narrow marking area. Then you need a folder, and it can be a bone folder or a Teflon folder or one of each. The bone folders are harder and good for scoring, and the Teflon folders are softer and good for folding. And then you need some adhesive. Now, in my work, I use PVA, polyvinyl acetate, and that works great. But I think in a museum or library setting, it'll be easier for you to use double-sided tape. This is 3M, I believe it's 450 is the number, and I'll be showing you how that works. And then two other tools that you don't need but are useful is a metal a metal triangle and dividers for transferring measurements. So these aren't something you need, but they're handy to have. Okay, so now I want to show you some scoring and folding. And the first thing that you need to know about board is that, like paper, it has grain. So the grain is the direction in which the fibers lie or come to lay in the paper making or board making process. So actually, I'm going to show you on this one here. Here's a square. So which way does the grain go? The grain is the direction in which the board wants to fold most easily. So on this square, it's this direction, not this one. And sometimes it's helpful to mark that if you think you might forget by just making a line that shows you which direction it's in. Okay? So, there are many ways of measuring and cutting. And over time, I have come to not use measurements at all. I don't measure, I don't take a ruler and look at it and say 1 inch and a quarter. What I do is I measure off the book itself with a marking and I transfer it over. And I'll be showing you that in a minute when we get to the to creating the wedge. But right now I just want to show you how to score and fold. So I like to use the markings on these grids, on these cutting mats, because they're really pretty accurate. And what I do is I bring my board up to the edge, and I do take care to make sure I have a square edge. And I bring it up to the line so that I can see the lines. So you can see right there, I can see the line here and here. And I use the lines to cut if I can. It's not always possible to do that, but say we want to fold this board at this location. We haven't done any measuring right now. I'm just trying to show you how these things work. So I take my bone folder. This is a wide bone folder, so I'm gonna bring my straight edge a little bit away from the line. And you want to hold the straight edge with pressure so that it doesn't move around. So I spread my hand out and I'm putting weight on both fingers, this one and thumb, and I bring the bone folder down and I have a ridge there. See that? Okay, now I'm going to flip the board over. Actually, I'm going to mark the board at the top and the bottom with the knife so you can see. And I'm going to line it up, that mark and this mark. I'm going to line those up with the same line that I used before. And now I'm going to bring the straight edge over. I spoke earlier about not using the straight edges that have cork on the bottom. This is where this is really important, because you want to make a cut that is light. We don't want to cut through the whole board. We're just cutting through a couple of layers in order to make the fold. So I bring my knife up to the edge of the straight edge and I try to hold it at a 90-degree angle. Oops, I just slipped, so I'll bring it back a little bit. Okay. Nope, that went off track. There we go, 1 and 2. And actually, this is a great place to say that mistakes are the best way to learn. So now I'm going to bring the board to the edge of the table and line that cut up. So the cut where the board is going to fold is on the outside. So there's your fold. The score was on the inside and the cut was on the outside. Okay. With 2-ply board, and this is a piece of 2-ply which we're going to be using in the next demo, you don't need to make a cut at all. All you need to do is score. So I'm just going to show you, first of all, here's the grain. It's running this way. And again, I line the board up with my lines. I take the bone folder and I run it down, and there's my score. I don't move the straight edge. I leave it right where it is, and I bring my hand up like that to make. Okay, so that is your lesson in scoring, cutting, and folding, and I'm going to set these aside now, and I'm going to run through making a wedge. Okay, so we're going to make another one of these, and here's an example of measuring by with the object rather than taking measurements and transferring them over. I'll use the pencil just because it's easier to see. So I want to make this mark here so that both of these will be the same height. So the first cut that I'm making is the upright. And I'm lining the board up as I explained earlier. In this case, since I'm going off a measurement that I already had, instead of lining the board up here to this line, I'm actually lining it up to the mark that I have. And this board was cut earlier, top and bottom, to be about a 1/4 inch smaller than the book. Use this folder that has a skinnier line. All right. I'm gonna make my score and then flip it over. Again, I'll use the pencil so you can see this a little bit better, but I'm marking here and here. So this is the fold that's going to go on the inside, and this is the cut that's going to go on the outside. And I usually do 2 fairly light cuts. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on this knife. There's my first fold. And then these measurements that I measured for this, I took the measurements off the book, and I'll show you in my next demo how I do that. But now I'm just trying to match this for the other side. So I'm going to bring this here, mark here. Oops. Okay, and then so this is the height, this is the width of the book minus a 1/4 inch or so, and then this this last here's a place where the triangle is useful, because what you want here is you want this to be square, so you can use your little triangle and make a mark. It's not quite there. There. Mark there. Here's my fold. I mean my score, not my fold. then the final one is going to be a cut. And this is going to go on the inside. So it has to be smaller than this. So my cut is going to go right here. And now I can demonstrate again how to cut through. Now I haven't done this before. I'm going to cut through the whole board. So the other cuts I was making, I was just cutting a couple of plies to make the fold. But this time I want to go through the whole board. And when you do that, the most important thing is you do not want to try to cut through the whole board in one motion, because you'll just go off track or cut your finger. So if you just go, you hold your straight edge firmly, and you just slowly start cutting. And it may take, let's see how long it takes. That's 2. And you want to stay on the same track. 3, 4. It's getting there. 6. Took 6 cuts to get through that piece of 4 ply. All right. And now we're going to just use the tape to put it together. And let's check that. This is the inside. And that's the outside. So I'm going to use 2 pieces of tape. One is going to go on the outside. Okay, and then the other one is going to go on the inside. There. Press those down. And you want to get these started. I usually get them started and then I finish pulling them later. So I just kind of scooch them like that so that I can check the positioning. Line them up. Okay, so I think I can one away. There's one. And then this one will come out like that. And there's the other one. And so now you have 2 wedges that you can use to support your book. Just pick a random page to demonstrate that. There you go. Okay, so we're going to start this second demonstration by talking about the materials a little bit more. So museum board, the parent sheet or the full size is 32 by 40. And these sheets are half, so it's 32 by 20. And I buy the museum board at my local art supply store, and they cut them in half for me so they're not awkward to carry. And that is one reason for using a local art supply store as opposed to a big distributor like Dick Blick. I mean, they have museum board too, and they might even have it in different sizes, which could be useful, but it's awkward to carry and store big sheets, so useful to be able to purchase it in half sheets. I love this museum board because it comes, in addition to white, it comes in off-white, warm white. The 4-ply comes in gray, which is really great. And the 2-ply and the 4-ply both come in black, which is a little bit more expensive, but if you want black, it's one of the few museum boards that comes in a solid black. The company also makes Stonehenge, which is an acid-free paper, just like that. They're both, the board and the papers that the Rising Company makes are rag content, pH neutral, high quality material. And that's one of the reasons I like using it. All right, so now we're gonna make a double-sided, wedge cradle. And we're gonna make it for this book here. So the first step is in cutting the entire length down to the size you want. And I'm gonna measure off the book itself. I mean, I could take a ruler and measure and measure and measure, and for me, that would be like a sure way to make an error along the way, transferring all those numbers. It is just so much easier to use the actual object. So I'm gonna put the book on the board, and I'm gonna take my probe, and I'm gonna make a mark that is the length of the book minus, about a 1/4 inch. It does not have to be exact. You just don't want the support to show. So actually, I'm gonna make that mark closer to the edge. So I'm gonna make it right here. So I'm gonna mark it with a pencil so that you can see it better. There's the mark. And now I want to transfer that mark to the other side of the board. And so the way I'm going to do that is first I'm going to take the edge of the board, which I know is straight, and I'm going to line it up with one of the lines on the grid. And now I am going to take a piece of extra board that I have. I'm going to put the straight edge right on the mark, or just under the mark. I'm going to take this extra piece of board, and I am going to mark the board. So this is my measurement. This is what I'm using instead of measuring. I'm going to transfer it down to this side and make another mark. I would normally use the pinprick, but I'm just going to use the pencil mark so you can see that better. And now I'm going to take the straight edge and line those two marks up. So here and here. And one thing I like to do is I like to check the space underneath it. That is a clue to me that I've got the straight edge right where I want it. So this one, I'm just going to move it a little bit up there. So I'm looking, just to make that a little clearer, I'm looking at the mark I made here, and I'm also looking down here at this space to double check that I've got the same measurement on both sides. And once I'm confident with that, I'm going to take my my knife and run it along the straight edge. And this is the same procedure as we did before, only I'm running a much longer length. So one of the things I do is I move along the straight edge, putting pressure. So I'm going to start here. I'm not trying to cut through the whole board. So I move my hand and I pull. So I think that was 3 times across. It's much easier to cut 2-ply than it is to cut the 4-ply. So now I have my the piece that's going to go across. All right, and so I am going to start with this measurement, which is how high do I want the book to sit. And you know, this book opens pretty well, and so I'm going to probably use a rise that's about 2 fingers worth. And you know, this would be a place where if you wanted to use a measurement, you could use this little triangle and say, oh, well, you know, I think 1.5 inches would be good. So you could do that. Or you could just use the this method, which is you just figure out where you want that, hold it, make a mark, bring the mark over, and we're going to start scoring, and we're going to start scoring and folding. So put the rest over here. All right, so there's my first fold. I'm going to line it up with one of the lines. It's important that this, you know, that this first measurement be as straight as you can get it, because over the length of this board, your errors will multiply. So I'm holding the straight edge down to make my fold. If I'm right-handed, it's easier to do it in this direction. Let's see. And you could check how that sits with your book before you keep going, because you know, if you thought this was too tall, you could trim it down right now. But I think that looks pretty good. And now the next measurement is going to be the width of the book minus about 1/4 inch. That pencil. Well, I don't know where the pencil went. I'll just use the bone folder. Actually, this one is fold in the opposite direction, so I'm just gonna cut here. It's gonna fold this way. If we were live, you could ask them questions, but you could just hold those questions and type them in or save them for the end here. So now you want the next one to be the width of your spine. And while I'm folding and scoring, I'll just say that, you know, the book terminologies, the spine of the book is the back of the book, and the top is often referred to as the head. The bottom of the book is often referred to as the tail. Okay. Here's another. Oops, I moved the straight edge. I want to bring it back to make the score. So now we have that. So now this next measurement is going to be the same as this. So instead of going back to the book, I'm just going to use my handy dandy piece of board to measure. Transfer that over. This one's going to go this way. And this one is going to be the same as this one. Well, there is our rough book support. And I want this to be square. And this last fold is going to be, so that the 2-ply is a lot softer. Doesn't have to be perfect. So this is our base. And this is going to, here's our last fold. And then we need to make one cut. And I always make sure I use a clean side when I'm doing another one of these measurements. So I'm going to measure this, but it's going to be smaller because this has to go on the inside. And this is going to be a cut, not a fold. Go right there. And this cut. And inside. Inside, so it's going to get the tape right here. And this is the outside, so the tape is going to go down here. I mean, you could probably just have enough with one piece of wider tape. This tape does come in different widths. Now we're going to assemble it. So I'm going to make the folds all a bit sharper and start peeling off. Oops. Yeah, so you do want to, when you put the tape on, you want to rub over the tape to make sure it's adhered to one side. That there. I do the outside so I can line it up. There we go. Pull that one out. And there is our double-sided wedge cradle. Now, the one other thing I wanted to show you is that if the pages are lifting up like this because the book is tightly bound in some way, you can use polyethylene or a strip of mylar. I'm just going to cut that. Polyethylene and mylar are inert materials, so they're good to use. And you can use the double-sided tape or really any kind of tape. You can use any kind of tape for this because you're going to make sure that the tape is nowhere near the book. Feed this through here. Oh, this might not be long enough. Yep, I need a longer piece. Let's see. Use my longer straight edge. So the mylar is a little stiffer. The polyethylene is nice to use. I usually use mylar, but polyethylene is nice to use if you have paper that is fragile. But I happen to have a lot of mylar, so it's what I mostly use. Feed the mylar through here. It doesn't need to be quite this long, so I'll just cut some of that off. And we'll put a little bit of tape there. So the tape is not coming anywhere near the page. And then you're just gonna slide it so that it's on the back side of the book. And that will hold your page down. You could also go all the way through the support too. I just have it around, oh no, it's all the way through the support there. Yeah, okay, good. Okay, that's it. And before I finish, I just want to show you one more thing, which is that there are other materials that you could use. I was just trying to simplify this presentation and not go into a lot of other details, but there is corrugated, acid-free corrugated museum board that you can use. And you could also use mylar. Here's a little support I made out of mylar. And some institutions use this Vivac to make, which is I'm not sure what the material is, some kind of plastic, and it comes with a coating to protect it from scratching. But it's hard to cut through. So, and the one last thing I wanted to show you is that you can make another wedge and use that to tilt your book cradle. In which case you would have to put in some little stops at the bottom that you can make with small pieces of museum board. So here's another wedge that just was attached to the bottom of the double cradle. And that is it.
Hi.
Hello. Carolina, can you turn your video back on?
Oh, yes, thank you. Wait, sorry, Beth, what am I pressing here? I'm going to the,
Start
I forgot
video.
where to go. Was that?
Start video.
Start video, okay. You know, it says unable to start video. I'm not sure.
Apologize for the technical. Let me.
It says the host has stopped it.
How's that? That's my
Okay.
fault. But we
Okay, there I am.
have
Okay, so should I just go and answer some of the questions I already saw
we
there?
start that, but we also had a few that came in through the chat that
Okay.
so we had one from Palma who asked, what is the best thickness for making supports?
Yes, well, so it depends on the thickness of the book. And in terms of ease of cutting, I mean, 2-ply, if you're doing things by hand, 2-ply is the easiest to cut. Also the corrugated board, just like with the 4-ply museum board, you would just only cut through one side of the layers and then fold on the other side. While we're on that particular question, somebody asked about foam core, and I really haven't had a lot of experience with foam core. Again, it's the same technique. You just cut one side and then halfway through. But the limited experience I've had with foam core is that it is just a ragged material on the inside. The only thing I would suggest is maybe making sure that you have a very sharp knife edge, like when you're cutting. So maybe change your blade before you cut through the foam core. I think that.
Jennifer asked what type of board you use, and so we did speak about the different types of boards.
Can I just say one thing about that? So that there are, you know, like Talus, which is on your resource sheet, they carry different museum boards. There are other museums of the quality of rising, but you definitely want to avoid boards like Crescent and Strathmore because they are just very hard to cut through. Yeah.
Are there tricks or cutting techniques for cutting large pieces of board that extend beyond your self-healing board?
You know, my cutting board is 36 by 24. And actually that leads me to just point out that to set up to do this costs some money. So the cutting mat costs money, a good straight edge costs money. And so if you are just have 1 or 2 books that you need cradles for, it may be worth just buying cradles. So, and there's also on the list of resources, some sources for buying commercially made cradles. But yeah, if you're gonna invest in doing this on your own, it does take some money just to get set up.
Alicia asked, what is the advantage of using 2 wedges versus the double-sided cradle?
You know, I think just that they're easier to make, especially if you're beginning, you know. I think also that they're probably, they're interchangeable and you could use them for other exhibits, you know. And actually that reminds me that when Kate was helping me put this together, she told me that at the University of Washington libraries, they don't throw any of their supports away and they reuse them from exhibit to exhibit. So when one library is having an exhibit, they'll come to the Conservation Center where they've got a whole bunch of old cradles that they go through and, oh, this is a good size, I can use this, you know. I am a big advocate for reuse, recycling.
And then we have one more question here from Ian, who asks, on determining the angle for the book cradle, for good viewing, it seems like the wider open, the better. How do you assess how much a delicate book can open without damaging it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I noticed that that the cradles that Kate designed, a lot of them have a very let me see. So here's the one I made, but Kate's have much more of a sharper angle. So you know, you just don't want to push it beyond where it wants to go. And I think it's, I don't know, I think it's just your own judgment that you need to use along the way there.
Have you found any damage over time with holding the book open using the mylar or polyethylene straps? How do you determine how tight that should be?
Yeah, I just do it so that it's like snug but not super tight, because you don't want it to abrade. And so yeah, the difference between those two is that the polyethylene is just way much softer. So if you have a book that has very fragile, brittle paper, well, you might want to consider not exhibiting that paper, just that would be one to copy, or you just want to just make it loose enough so that it's holding it, but not, because you do have to slide that piece so that the tape is underneath, and you don't want to tear the paper when you're doing that.
Julia commented in the chat that she's been to workshops where old cutting mats were actually cut into strips for students to use. Not ideal, but it's a great example of reusing something.
Yeah, I never throw mine away. I just give them away. Or I cut them up and use them for workshops, yeah.
And then we'll do one last question from Alicia. Is there an archival product you recommend to wrap the cradles in for storage and reuse?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you would just want to, I guess I would just say maybe like some kind of bin where they're not going to collect dust. I mean, more than anything, the museum board is just such high quality material, really. It's gonna last.
Well, let me pull back up the PowerPoint real quick.
Oh, one other thing, I just want to apologize for the fuzzy video, but I am happy to just be able to have done the timing on the presentation so you can see the whole thing.
Well, thank you so much, Carolina, and to all of you for joining us today, and hope asking these great questions and hopefully bringing the skill back to your institution. Before we go, we're grateful. We wanted to announce our next 2 webinars. So on January 21st, we will have Kathleen Daly of Portland, Oregon, discussing how to mount textiles for storage and display and choosing the right stitches to use. And then on February 18th, we will have Madison Brockman and Andrew W. Mellon Fellow for Paper Conservation at LACMA, discussing the stabilization of fragile documents. We're really excited to be presenting these, and we're just posted the link on our website under workshops for registering for the January one. I'm going to put mine and Carolina's contact information up on the screen shortly, but if you have future ideas for future webinars or any questions about RCWR, please don't hesitate to get in touch. As a reminder, we would love to find someone who's here today who might want to write about what they're learning from this experience. If that's you, send me an email. And if you're not a member of RCWR, please consider joining today. We represent collections professionals across our 9 Western states as a regional affiliate of CSAAM. In addition to this webinar series, we look forward to hosting in-person events again in the future when we're able to do that, but we also send out our weekly job listing emails, our quarterly newsletter, and provide stipends for regional and national conferences, whether they are virtual or in person this year. Membership is only $15 a year, so consider joining at rcwr.org. I do have the recording of this webinar, and I'll add back in that little beginning part that I missed. So it might take me a day to get the video editing done, but we'll get that up on our YouTube page and linked to from our website. So if you wanted to go back to this video, we'll have that. And I have the reference materials that Carolina mentioned, so I'll be sending those out to all attendees immediately after this webinar. So thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you, Carolina, for this amazing demonstrations, and we hope to see you all in January. Happy holidays.
Okay.